Welcome to the Elixir podcast, where we ask people from all walks of life and from around the world what their favourite poem is and why it's important to them, why or how it speaks to their heart. The podcasts are short little forays into the heart and mind of another, and we called the podcast Elixir because we feel that poetry has a sort of magical power that might turn iron into gold or induce love, that it works as a medicine for the spirit, or simply, as the word's derivation suggests, from the Arabic Elixir and the Greek chedion, as a powder for drying wounds. You can find links to the poems on the podcast listing and on my website, helenwing.com.
Bright were the castle buildings, many the bathing halls, high the abundance of gables, great the noise of the multitude, many a mead hall full of festivity, until fate the mighty changed that.
Welcome everyone to the Elixir podcast, where we ask people if they have a poem that speaks to them, that they really like, and why. Today we're going to be talking to Kate, who is in Gosport. Hello, Kate.
Hello, Helen.
It's lovely to be speaking with you. Can you introduce your poem for us, please, and then read it to us, and then I'll ask you a question.
Okay, so my proviso is I'm only going to do favourite poems if I can say favourite poem of the week, because I think these things have to change, but this one comes back and does occupy quite a few weeks of my favourite poem slot. It's called The Ruin, and it is very old now, over 1,000 years old. Nobody knows quite how old, but over 1,000 anyway.
Okay, lovely. So this was a poem that was originally in Anglo-Saxon, am I right?
Yes, yeah. And this translation is just one of quite a few and fairly randomly selected, actually. I think the reason I picked this one actually is because you can sort of see the Anglo-Saxon version next to it. And I quite like that because it gives you a bit of a sense of the sounds of the words as well, which I always really like, even though I can't speak Anglo-Saxon.
Okay. Would you like to read it to us, please?
Okay, I'm going to read, it's about 49 lines long, so I'm going to read a bit from the middle of it. So I guess just to give you the beginning in some way, it starts with a person just walking around an ancient city that's been completely ruined. So they've been looking around, and I'm going to read you the sort of daydreamy bit from the middle of the poem, which goes like this. Bright were the castle buildings, many the bathing halls, high the abundance of gables, great the noise of the multitude, many a mead hall full of festivity, until fate the mighty changed that. Far and wide the slain perished, days of pestilence came, death took all the brave men away, their places of war became deserted places, the city decayed. The rebuilders perished, the armies to earth. And so these buildings grow desolate, and this red curved roof parts from its tiles of the ceiling vault. The ruin has fallen to the ground, broken into mounds, where at one time many a warrior, joyous and ornamented with gold bright splendour, proud and flushed with wine, shone in war trappings, looked at treasure, at silver, at precious stones, at wealth, at prosperity, at jewellery, at this bright castle of a broad kingdom.
Wow, that's very powerful. That's incredibly powerful. What a vision, Kate. Would you like to tell us what that makes you feel? Why you particularly like this poem? What it says to you personally?
I think that I don't know whether it's maybe just me or maybe it's something to do with being in my 40s and heading to 50. I have spent maybe an unhealthy amount of time thinking about the end of the world and the ends of things. And I like, so actually it speaks to me really on a very personal level, this poem. And weirdly, even though it's a really painful thing to read, it makes me sad every time. Like it can make me cry when I read it. There is something in it, in some of the kind of the complexity of somebody walking around something that's ruined and actually I guess maybe making the imaginative effort to think about what's there and what was there and what used to be there, that I find really comforting. Yeah, it's quite hard for me to kind of unpack that, but I think there is an amazing comfort in the idea that amidst all of the destruction that the person looking around the ruin is imagining, and in all the failure of like trying to kind of like, one of the things that I like is that they think that this poem was written about Bath, the kind of Roman remains that were left in the city of Bath, and they kind of get it wrong, like the way that they imagine these sort of golden-headed warriors, that actually comes from the world of the narrator, not really the world of the Roman remains that were left. And yet there is still that connection. There's still that wanting to reach and trying to kind of find the life that has gone, the splendor that's gone, that I think actually fills me with a sort of hope about who we are. And like that some of it's to do with Britain, I guess, and the history of Britain being this kind of complicated layering of people coming from all over the place that, is still going on today. And that I find quite comforting as well. But I think just the way that we do reach out for each other, we do try to find truths even when it's really hard to reconstruct in our own minds. It makes me feel less lonely when I read this poem, actually.
Oh, yes, that's so true. It's a really amazing thought. And actually, it's lovely to think that actually, even when something is in ruins, you can still capture the essence of what that person was or that place was, and that those things remain and that they're echoed throughout our times. And this is why it's lovely that you're reading something that was written originally in Anglo-Saxon, that it stands the test of time.
Absolutely does, and like in really amazing ways. Like this poem, the original copy that we have, has a massive diagonal burn through some of the words, so that like even the poem itself is a kind of ruin. It's like it's sort of, you're reconstructing it, you're guessing at the gaps, because we don't know what was there. And yeah, I think that effort that we make to communicate with each other is a beautiful thing about being human. I really like it.
Yeah. And I mean, on a personal level, if you're thinking of the human self as a cathedral or a massive building, that we often pass through our moment of glory without realizing that that is it. And actually, I experience our life as a type of constant sense of ruination, if you like. I don't know whether that's true for everyone, but as time passes, that consciousness that we're harking back sort of in a palimpsestic way to a, if you like, a text of ourselves that isn't findable, isn't, but we trust that it's there, just as we trust in the past, actually. And like you say, it gives you hope for the future and gives you a sense of connectivity with humanity,
I really like that, actually. I really like the idea of, yeah, like the kind of falling orbit of ruination. The other part of that is that you have no idea what's going to survive you. Like you don't know whether this red tiled roof here or this wall here is going to be sort of falling down. So that in some ways that's a really dark thought, but in others it sort of sets you free. That actually it's just not controllable. You can't see what's going to remain of you. which is, I guess, also a good sort of invocation to be nice as much as you possibly can, because you don't really want it to be the kind of like, the latrines that are left of you, really, do you?
That's wonderful. Okay, Kate, now that you've talked about how this poem speaks to you, I'd really like it if you could read it one more time so that our listeners can, if you like, apply your feeling to the poem, because that's what I think is so important, is people understanding that poetry is not necessarily an intellectual exercise, but you respond with your heart, and you actually, and it's not a bad thing that you take a poem personally, actually, that you take it into yourself. So if you could read it one more time, that would be lovely.
My pleasure. Bright were the castle buildings, many the bathing halls, high the abundance of gables, great the noise of the multitude, many a mead hall full of festivity, until fate the mighty changed that. Far and wide the slain perished, days of pestilence came. Death took all the brave men away. Their places of war became deserted places. The city decayed. The rebuilders perished. The armies to earth. And so these buildings grow desolate, and this red curved roof parts from its tiles of the ceiling vault. The ruin has fallen to the ground, broken into mounds, where at one time many a warrior, joyous and ornamented with bright gold splendour, proud and flushed with wine, shone in war trappings, looked at treasure, at silver, at precious stones, at wealth, at prosperity, at jewellery, in this bright castle of a broad kingdom.
Thank you. That was really moving. Thank you so much, Kate. We'll be asking our friend who learned Anglo-Saxon to read this part of the poem as well, and you will in the details of the podcast wherever you're listening, and also through a link to my website, which is helenwing.com. Thank you very much, Kate, and thank you everybody for listening.
Vedend krungan hergaste hurusen, fordandas hovodureriath, ondas te forgetha tigulum shereth, frostvegas rof.
Thank you for listening to the Elixir podcast. My name is Helen Wing, and you can find more information about the poems that we talk about on my website at helenwing.com. The podcast is produced by Tom Platts at Sapien. Tom also creates each episode's original music. To find out more, go to soundsapien.com.